with that frightening attack at a national park, a bison charging a 17-year-old in North Dakota. The teen is now speaking out, and Paula Ferris is here with more. Paula, this is the second bison attack in a week.
For most people, the American plains bring to mind open skies, wild freedom, and the thundering herds of bison that once ruled the land. But few realize just how close those animals came to disappearing forever. In the late 1800s, Texas made a decision that changed the course of history. Determined to protect ranches and reshape the land, the state built a massive 500-mile steel bison barrier stretching across the plains. It wasn't just a fence, it was a weapon designed to wipe out an entire species. How far did this go? Join us in this video as we reveal the details. The plains once thundered with them. Millions of bison once ruled the plains, including what we now call Texas. Early Spanish explorers were stunned by what they saw. They wrote that the herds were as countless as fish in the sea. For Native American tribes, these animals weren't just wildlife. They were food, clothing, tools, medicine, and a core part of their spiritual world. Life, culture, and tradition all flowed from the bison. But everything changed in the 1800s. When new settlers and commercial hunters arrived, the bison's world collapsed almost overnight. What followed became known as the Great Slaughter, a grim chapter between 1820 and 1880 when the U.S. government openly encouraged the mass assassination of bison to break Native American resistance. The new transcontinental railroad sliced through migratory routes, letting hunters shoot bison from train windows and leaving carcasses scattered across the plains. By the 1890s, the unimaginable had happened. From millions, fewer than 1,000 bison remained. Indigenous communities that depended on them were pushed onto reservations, stripped of their traditional way of life. Then, just as extinction seemed inevitable, a few people stepped in. In the early 1900s, Yellowstone National Park bought 21 bison from private owners to help rebuild what was nearly lost forever. Slowly, the species began to recover. Today, around 400,000 bison live in commercial herds across the U.S., and about 20,000 roam freely in conservation herds. In Texas, one of the most important is the official state herd at Caprock Canyon State Park, more than 240 strong, according to Jamie Killian of the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. It's a reminder of how close America came to losing an animal that once defined the Great Plains, and how much effort it took to bring them back from the edge. But what happens when America decides to test the survival of the bison? Keep watching to find out. Bison in the desert. A risky experiment pays off. Over a century ago, 30 to 60 million bison roamed this continent, but by the early 1900s, fewer than 1,000 remained alive. Yes, that's not a typo. Millions reduced to barely hundreds, and almost all locked behind fences. That's why in 2014, when conservationists announced they were moving over 250 bison to a remote patch of high desert in the Great Plains, it felt wrong. Not just controversial, but backward. This wasn't a traditional prairie, just windswept sandstone, sparse grass, and barely enough water for deer. Yet, they did it anyway. At first, the bison vanished into the rugged landscape. Reading about the plan back in 2014, it sounded absurd. Bison in the desert? The GPS coordinates seemed off, but they didn't die. In fact, they didn't behave as anyone expected. Collars on the animals revealed strange seasonal patterns. Instead of staying in lowland meadows, they wandered into uphill grazing areas with barely any vegetation. They were adapting, but on their own terms. There were no fences, no feeders, no backup plans. All they had was the land and the bison. It was the boldest attempt at rewilding America anyone had tried in decades. Not everyone was thrilled. The plan sounded more like a grad student's thesis than U.S. wildlife policy. But the project, spearheaded by the Division of Wildlife Resources and backed by the U.S. Forest Service and Bureau of Land Management, aimed to create a self-sustaining bison herd that could help restore native ecosystems, even if the terrain didn't fit the classic image of a prairie. What they got instead was sagebrush, red rock, and brutal winters. Ecologists, however, saw potential. This land hadn't been overgrazed like most U.S. rangelands. It was remote, untouched in places, and still carried traces of what the ecosystem might have looked like before cattle arrived. The idea was radical, but rooted in science. Let bison be bison. Free-roaming, migratory, and wild. No supplemental feeding, no forced breeding, and no roundups unless absolutely necessary. For those involved, it was a moonshot, a chance to test whether bison, after nearly going extinct, could still play their original role as ecosystem engineers. These animals weren't just big grazers. They shaped the land. Their hooves broke up the soil. Their grazing patterns created natural fire breaks, and their wallows formed shallow pools that helped water infiltrate the ground. If the bison thrived, the land could thrive too. But make no mistake, this was not Yellowstone. This was the high desert. To most onlookers, it seemed like a recipe for disaster. Ranchers worried about grazing competition, disease transmission, and herd control. One wrong winter, and the bison could die. One wrong summer, and they could starve. Fingers would be pointed, and debates would ignite. Still, the project launched quietly. No ribbon cutting, no press conference, just a convoy of trailers, a few weary biologists, and one of the boldest conservation experiments in modern American history. Critics sharpened their knives from the start. Locals were skeptical, ranchers called it reckless, and even some biologists, off the record, admitted they didn't expect the herd to last more than a few seasons. "You don't drop buffalo in the desert and expect anything but bones," one rancher told a Salt Lake City journalist in 2015. The Henry Mountains weren't forgiving, with elevations ranging from 6,000 to over 11,000 feet. Summers scorching, winters snow-laden, and vegetation patchy and sparse. Not the rolling fields of tall grass bison are known to graze in. Politics complicated the picture further. Bison were seen as national treasures by some, oversized pests by others. Their comeback threatened grazing leases, raised concerns about brucellosis, and sparked debates over land use rights. Some interpreted the reintroduction not as restoration, but as a symbolic challenge to the cattle industry. Support was cautious at best. No one was donating, promoting, or expecting success. Yet nature has its own timetable. Year 1 turned into Year 5, and subtle signs of progress began to emerge. Green patches appeared in old grazing corridors. Birds returned to areas they hadn't occupied in decades. Soil held moisture just a bit longer after rain. The bison were not failing. They were quietly reshaping the land. Small as the signs were, they showed that wild bison, even in an unforgiving desert, could survive, adapt, and begin the long work of restoring ecosystems they had once dominated. So, did the experiment of taking the bison to the desert turn out successfully? Let's find out. 10 years later, the bison comeback. For almost a decade, the herd barely made headlines. No viral photos, no national news segments. Just bison out there in the desert doing what bison do. Grazing, moving, vanishing into canyons, reappearing weeks later near water holes no one had mapped. Scientists watched quietly, cautiously waiting for the moment things would fall apart. But it didn't. Instead of collapsing, the herd grew, slowly but steadily, from 250 to 300, then 350. By year 7, estimates passed 400. These weren't numbers pulled from wishful thinking. They came from hard data, drones, field biologists, and GPS collars. Somehow, against all odds, the bison were thriving. Then came the ripple effects. Plants began returning, not just grasses, but native forbs and wildflowers that hadn't been seen in decades. The bison weren't just eating, they were reshaping the land, loosening soil, breaking hard crusts with their hooves, allowing seeds to take root and water to sink in. Their wallows, shallow depressions formed when they rolled in the dirt, became natural catch basins for rainwater, creating tiny micro-wetlands. With new plant life came insects. With insects came birds. And ecologists who had once written off the landscape as too far gone started paying attention. The public, for the most part, remained unaware. No press releases, no government videos celebrating success. Just buried reports, academic papers quietly noting unexpected prairie restoration, and field biologists exchanging knowing glances. Even some of the original skeptics began to notice. Ranchers who had feared land degradation saw more resilient pastures nearby. Hunters reported healthier elk and deer. Some even started calling the bison ecosystem janitors, a compliment no one would have predicted a decade earlier. All of this unfolded slowly, almost invisibly, like a forest returning after a fire. Nothing dramatic or fast, but it was happening. When the 10-year mark arrived, it wasn't a celebration. It was a quiet realization. The desert wasn't dying, it was coming back to life. Everyone who had doubted the experiment returned with a simple question. Did it work? The answer wasn't just yes. It was yes, and then some. The herd had more than doubled, but that wasn't the most surprising part. The real shock came from the land itself. Satellite imagery confirmed it. Areas once considered semi-barren were now teeming with plant diversity. Grass cover had increased by more than 40% in some sectors. Seasonal wildflowers had returned. Insect populations rebounded. Birds that hadn't been recorded in the area for over 30 years were nesting again. Streams that once dried up every summer now held water longer into the season. The bison weren't just surviving, they were engineering a comeback. Unlike cattle, which overgraze and linger in one spot, bison roam constantly. Their movement distributes pressure across the land, giving plants time to recover. Their hooves break up compacted soil. Their waste returns nutrients to the ground, and their wandering opens seedbeds, giving new growth a chance to take hold. In the high desert, these ancient creatures were quietly restoring the ecosystem they had once ruled. After a decade, what can the desert teach about restoration? Stay tuned to find out. The desert teaches a lesson. Nature restored. What researchers saw after 10 years was exactly what early ecologists had always theorized. But now, it wasn't theory. It was proof. The results forced people to rethink what they believed about wilderness. This desert was never meant to be empty. It had been waiting for the return of the species that once kept it alive. The Henry Mountains were never Yellowstone, but with the bison back, they were becoming something just as powerful. A high desert prairie shaped by time, weather, and wild animals doing exactly what they were built to do. Even former critics had to acknowledge it. Ranchers who once protested the project began supporting cooperative land-sharing programs. Wildlife corridors were expanded. Conservation groups hailed the project as a blueprint, a bold, low-intervention approach that actually worked. And the best part? It didn't require endless human interference. No artificial irrigation, no hand seeding. All it needed was bison and patience. What happened wasn't magic. It was nature finally given the chance to do its job, and it did exceedingly well. No one expected a desert to teach the country how to bring nature back, yet that's exactly what happened. The success of the Henry Mountains Bison Project didn't just surprise scientists. It rewrote the playbook for conservation in the U.S. Almost overnight, land managers and ecologists began revisiting long-dismissed ideas. If a self-managed herd could restore a degraded ecosystem in one of the harshest environments in the West, what else might be possible? Could elk, pronghorn, or even wolves play similar roles in rebuilding balance where humans had disrupted it? What was once considered radical was now being taken seriously. States like Colorado and New Mexico began exploring similar reintroductions. Tribes across the Great Plains, already decades into bison restoration efforts, gained new allies and attention. The narrative was shifting. Bison weren't just symbols of the past, they were tools for the future. Even in the political arena, attitudes softened. Ranchers who once protested were attending public meetings to learn how to coexist with the herd. Some signed land use agreements allowing shared grazing zones. Others joined soil health initiatives inspired by the ecological ripple effects they witnessed firsthand. By year 10, the bison were more than a herd. They had become a movement. Students studied them. Documentaries were made. Scientists cited the project as a model of low-cost, high-impact ecological restoration. Most importantly, land once written off as lost was quietly thriving. And perhaps the most shocking part? None of it required a massive budget. No advanced technologies, no helicopters dropping seed pods, no endless interventions. The transformation happened because people stepped back, reintroduced a keystone species, and let the ecosystem remember how to function. It changes the way you think about conservation. Sometimes, the best action is to stop trying to control everything and let nature remember who it is. In a world racing to fix climate damage with bigger, newer solutions, the Bison experiment offered something ancient and surprisingly simple: a return to what already worked. So yes, the US released hundreds of bison into the desert. But 10 years later, it wasn't a failure. It was a lesson. A lesson humans are only beginning to understand. How did bison bring about the survival of a town? Let's find out. The town the buffalo brought back. Before the bison returned, the tiny city of Quitaque, Texas, was fading fast. A walk down Main Street told the whole story. Empty storefronts, collapsing buildings, and a silence that settled over the town like dust. The only traffic came from truck drivers hauling cattle across the panhandle. Quitaque had once been a thriving community of 945 people, but over the decades, that number dropped to just over 300. Longtime resident Albert Castillo remembers when the town had 5 gas stations. Now it has just 1. The grocery store he manages is the last one standing out of what used to be 4. At one time I thought it would be a ghost town, Castillo said. People were struggling back then, and it was kinda hard. But something remarkable happened a little more than a decade ago. In this remote stretch of Texas, about 100 miles southeast of Amarillo, a wildlife restoration project breathed life back into both a nearly lost species and a nearly lost town. 2 symbols of the American West, the bison and a fading frontier community, began saving each other. Quitaque sits at the gateway to Caprock Canyon State Park, just a few miles north, where hundreds of bison now roam freely as part of a sweeping conservation effort. Visitors from across the country travel to see them, bringing new hope and fresh energy to a town that was once expected to disappear. Entering Caprock Canyons feels like stepping into a different time. Massive bison move across the prairie in slow, powerful herds, their deep grunts echoing through the dry air. Tumbleweeds collect against old pens, and the sweeping canyonlands glow with vibrant reds and golds. It's a stunning contrast to the flat pastures and oil fields that surround this part of West Texas. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Department estimates that before the Great Slaughter of the late 1800s, anywhere between 30 million and 60 million bison roamed the southern plains. By the 1870s, hunters had nearly wiped them out. But one act of compassion changed the species' destiny. In 1878, Mary Ann Goodnight, the wife of prominent rancher Charles Goodnight, insisted her husband rescue a few orphaned bison calves. Their small act of preservation grew into a herd of about 200 animals. Over time, the Goodnights supplied bison to Yellowstone National Park, major zoos, and many ranches across the country. Eventually, the herd diminished to around 50 to 80 animals, hidden away on the JAA Ranch near Caprock Canyons. In 1994, German wildlife conservationist Wolfgang Frey suggested this obscure herd might be the last living descendants of the original Southern Plains bison. Genetic testing largely supported the idea. When Quitaque residents learned this, they pushed for the herd's protection and return to public land. In the late 1900s, the animals were moved to Caprock Canyon State Park, where they initially roamed a modest 300-acre enclosure. Visitors could only see them from afar. In 2011, the bison gained access to 700 acres, and today they roam across much of the park's 15,000 acres. "They're survivors, you know," said Park Superintendent Donald Beard, one of the bison's strongest advocates. "They've survived our best attempt at trying to get rid of them, and they're making a comeback." And as the bison return to their ancestral range, Quitaque is finding its way back, too. The buffalo are not just reviving the land, they're reviving a community that once stood on the brink of disappearing forever. As the town thrives, Can the herd survive long-term challenges? Keep watching to find out. A herd still fighting for its future. Today, the Caprock Canyons herd has grown to about 350 bison, a remarkable comeback considering how close the species came to disappearing. But when Park Superintendent Donald Beard looks out at those powerful animals grazing across the canyonlands, he doesn't see a finished success story. He sees the very beginning. Beard believes the southern plains need far more bison if the species is going to have a real chance at long-term survival. His biggest concern is simple but serious. All 350 animals live in one place. They're absolutely vulnerable, he said. We've got all our eggs in a basket right here. One basket. A single outbreak of disease or a wildfire could wipe out the entire herd. That's why he hopes to expand the population to around 2,000 bison and spread them into satellite herds across the region. To make that happen, he's looking to partner with conservation organizations and Native American tribes who may have the land and capacity to support new herds. Caprock Canyon simply isn't large enough to hold many more animals. Beard's vision mirrors efforts happening nationwide, building stability for the species by distributing herds and protecting genetic diversity. We need more of these animals, he said. 350 is a great number, but it's not enough to call it a conservation success. One group working toward that same mission is the Intertribal Buffalo Council. Executive Director Troy Heinert helps manage about 20,000 buffalo across 80 tribes, blending conservation with cultural revival. For many Native nations, restoring these animals isn't just environmental work, it's a pathway back to tradition, identity, and the ways of their ancestors. Heinert says tribes see the buffalo as a relative, a living connection to history and survival. He's encouraged by the growing support from state and federal governments for tribes reintroducing bison to their lands. That support strengthens a relationship that goes back centuries. One thing about buffalo, they are very resilient, Heinert said. We are a resilient people as well, and now we have the capacity to help the buffalo, and in turn, they will once again provide for us. For Beard, Heinert, and countless others, the mission is clear. The comeback isn't complete until bison are thriving across the plains again, not just in one park, but in many places where they once shaped the land and the people who lived there. With the expansion of the bison close to Quitaque, how far did their revival go? Keep watching to find out. The Buffalo Revived Town. As the bison herd expanded across Caprock Canyons, the ripple effect reached the nearby city of Quitaque. Park visitation, which once hovered around 36,000 visitors per year, nearly doubled last year to roughly 80,000. The influx of tourists brought new life to a town that had been quiet for decades. Guy Young, a longtime resident, remembers the downtown area as nearly deserted just 15 years ago. There wasn't a single one of those buildings that was occupied, he said. Maybe one, two possibly. But over the past decade, the streets have slowly come back to life. An antique store, coffee shop, bed and breakfast, and gift shop have all opened, adding color and activity to the once empty blocks. That doesn't sound like very much, but when you're going from 0 to 4, or 1 to 4, just small steps like that are pretty big for us, Young said. He also serves as president of the First National Bank in Quitaque. The city has embraced its new identity with bison-themed tributes everywhere. Murals of colorful bison grace old building walls, statues of the animals stand guard along Main Street, and T-shirts featuring the iconic creatures are sold in local shops. In 2015, Governor Greg Abbott officially declared Quitaque the bison capital of Texas, cementing the town's link to the animals. The city also hosts Bison Fest every year to raise funds for the herd at Caprock Canyons, celebrating both the wildlife and the community it supports. For residents like Young, the impact is clear. The canyons, what's kept the community alive, he said. The presence of the bison has done more than restore an ecosystem. It has reignited pride, identity, and economic activity in a town that once faced decline. Mayor Phil Bearfield, a Quitaque resident for more than 45 years, sees continued growth on the horizon, but hopes the town never loses its character. "We were already known as a friendly community," he said, "but the Western way of life is what I'd like for us to continue to be known for." In Quitaque, the bison haven't just returned to the land. They've brought the heart of a community back to life. From revival to research, how is science shaping bison management today? Keep watching to find out. Science on the Range, Advancing Bison Management, Texas. AgriLife research, along with student projects, continues to push the boundaries of science related to bison management in the state, both for conservation and production. Harry Barboza, Ph.D., a professor in the departments of Ecology and Conservation Biology and Rangeland, Wildlife, and Fisheries Management, explained that research is focused on understanding the sustainability of bison in Texas. This work addresses basic challenges while establishing foundational knowledge for managing these majestic animals. Barboza has supervised numerous student research projects exploring bison, a species that once roamed the length of the Great Plains within the two Texas A&M College of Agriculture and Life Sciences departments. While bison could eventually become an increasingly important option for Texas ranchers, for now, they remain a niche opportunity. Bison meat commands a premium, roughly $9 per pound for ground bison, but production comes with significant challenges, from parasites and disease to temperament issues. Most bison are marketed as yearlings weighing between 300 and 500 pounds. This makes body condition and maximizing daily weight gain vitally important for producers. Early projects conducted by undergraduate and graduate students are designed to answer fundamental questions about bison management under production conditions. Widespread adoption of bison as a livestock option depends on research like this, developing scientific methods to ensure bison can be a sustainable addition to Texas ranching operations. Internal and external parasites present ongoing challenges, particularly in regions with higher moisture. Blood-feeding insects, like flies, not only directly injure bison, but can also carry diseases. Researchers still do not know exactly which fly species are most attracted to bison in Texas, and topical pesticides are difficult to apply effectively. Their temperament also adds another layer of complexity, making handling and management more challenging than with cattle. Several of Barboza's students have taken hands-on approaches to studying bison. Some have worked with local ranches to assess body condition scores, evaluate the impact of blood-feeding flies, and explore whether bat colonies could provide a natural method for controlling fly populations. Graduate student Bridget Benedict, in the Department of Ecology and Conservation Biology, studied northern ungulates, including bison and moose. In her work, Adverse Effects of Diptera Flies on Northern Ungulates, Rangifer, Alcis, and Bison, published in Mammal Review. Her research examined the cumulative damage caused by insect bites and vector-borne disease, and its effects on body condition and overall health. Barboza said her work lays critical groundwork for understanding how flies affect production, including body condition and daily weight gains. Undergraduate student Wyatt Steinbaugh expanded on Benedict's research, investigating whether bats could form a commensal relationship with bison, potentially serving as a natural fly control method. Using acoustic monitoring at 7 sites, 2 with bison, 1 with cattle, and 4 control sites without bovids, from March to November 2021, Steinbaugh also trapped insects from March to May 2021. While the study did not confirm a direct relationship between bats and bison, it suggested that bat colonies near sites with bison and cattle could help reduce swarming events. Environmental factors also influence pest impacts on bison. Texas weather allows insect activity almost year-round, adding stress to the animals. Some flies are opening the wound up, and some are keeping it open, and some are living on the animal and rarely let go, Barboza said. The ultimate goal of these studies is to achieve an optimal body condition for bison while developing solutions that combine diet, insect control, and parasite treatment. Each step forward helps ranchers, conservationists, and researchers better understand the challenges and strategies required to sustainably manage bison in Texas. How can bison resilience grow in Texas? Let's find out. Building bison resilience for the South. Much of the ongoing bison research in Texas is carried out in partnership with organizations like the Texas Bison Association, the National Bison Association, and various laboratories and researchers at Texas A&M. This includes work with the Department of Entomology and the Parasitology Laboratory in the School of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences. Together, they are tackling the unique challenges of raising bison in southern climates. Barboza emphasized that this research is crucial for reestablishing herds across Texas. Most bison currently come from northern states, such as the Dakotas, and are acclimated to cooler temperatures, different pests, and diseases native to those regions. Southern adapted bison phenotypes, once common across the southern Great Plains, were largely lost during the near extinction of the species. This loss poses a significant hurdle for restoring herds in Texas, where pests, heat, and other environmental pressures are very different from the north. To overcome these challenges, researchers and breeding programs are working to help bison develop new adaptations. By selecting animals with traits better suited for Texas conditions, from temperament to parasite resistance, they hope to establish herds that can thrive in the southern plains while maintaining genetic diversity. Bison is still a niche market, so it is tough for small producers to find value and reliability and consistent performance under normal conditions, Barboza said. Bison can tolerate a lot of things if we can get past issues with diet, insects, and parasites. His work, alongside others in Texas, is laying the groundwork to ensure bison not only survive, but also prosper in their historic southern range. What do you think about the reemergence of bison in Texas? Let us know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the next video shown on your screen to catch up on your favorite celebrity stories. See you there.